Have you ever felt the quiet power of walking alone, yet wondered if it's a sign of strength or a call to something deeper? In today's video, we'll explore the transformational journey of the modern woman who refused to be half again, who shattered old patterns, faced her shadows, and emerged more whole, more awake, and more unstoppable than ever. By watching this video, you'll discover why saying no can feel scarier than saying yes, and how each refusal is an act of radical self-love. How true individuation unlocks emotional sovereignty, empowering you to set boundaries that foster respect instead of resentment. The secret archetype of the awakened woman whose presence shifts the very atmosphere around her, and how you can tap into that energy. Practical ways to nourish yourself with silence, turning solitude into a wellspring of clarity, confidence, and courage. Why real love never demands self-denial, and how to recognize and refuse relationships that ask you to dim your light. Stay with us until the end, and you'll walk away with 3 actionable strategies to reclaim your inner authority, deepen your self-respect, and magnetize connections that honor your wholeness. Hit play now, and let's begin the journey from fragmentation to fearless freedom. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. Carl Jung once warned that every fear we refuse to face in ourselves will, without fail, be cast onto the world around us. And I find that truth both unsettling and liberating. Too many of us mistake solitude for loneliness when, in fact, it can be the richest soil for personal transformation. While so many chase fulfillment through external validation, the relentless ping of notifications, the warmth of a crowded room, or the fleeting comfort of romantic whispers, this remarkable woman made a brave turn inward. She dove headfirst into the untamed depths of her psyche, confronting shadows that had haunted her since childhood, the echo of abandonment in a parent's silence, the sting of love twisted into control, the ache of walls built around a broken heart. I feel her pain in my bones, because she, like so many of us, once believed that love meant giving until there was nothing left. She begged for crumbs of attention that should have been her birthright. She wore disappointment like armor, and she tolerated explanations that left her soul feeling hollow. And yet, through a cruel alchemy of heartbreak after heartbreak, those wounds stopped bleeding and started teaching. What you perceive as her stoicism isn't ice in her heart. It's the tempered steel of emotional maturity. True maturity demands honesty, presence, and depth. And once you taste it, you can never go back to surface-level existence. This woman doesn't settle for half-hearted affection or grandiose promises. She yearns for reciprocity, for a partner who brings as much to the table as she does, who shows up fully, unafraid to share vulnerability. That standard may seem intimidating or even impossible to those who are still tethered to old patterns of dependency, but she won't compromise. In her wholeness, she inspires 2 reactions: genuine admiration from souls who recognize the courage of self-discovery, and an uneasy fear in those who still seek to fill themselves with another's presence. She chose preservation over isolation. There is a subtle but crucial difference. Preservation is the act of guarding your inner sanctuary. Isolation is the self-imposed exile born of fear. But society, which still insists happily ever after only comes in pairs, often misreads her autonomy as a sign of failure. Jung observed that where conformity reigns, authenticity withers, and this woman rejects conformity fiercely. She measures success by the clarity of her voice, not by the empty accolades of a crowd. When people accuse her of being too demanding or remind her nobody's perfect, she offers a soft, almost amused smile. She knows what they call demanding is simply the baseline of self-respect she dared to demand of herself after years of self-betrayal. She isn't hunting for perfection. She's seeking a love mature enough to listen without judgment, to support without suffocating, to stand strong when storms roll in. That kind of love is rare, but she's learned that waiting is better than settling. Her very existence acts as a mirror, reflecting hidden insecurities and unexamined dependencies. She isn't trying to shame anyone, she's simply living freely. And to those still shackled by fear, her freedom can feel like an accusation. Yet she presses on, unbowed, because she knows that living honestly is the most radical act of all. Every choice she makes, from spending a quiet evening journaling rather than joining a raucous party, to declining invitations that would dim her light, is an affirmation of her worth. When she says no, it's not out of spite, it's a declaration of what she values. When she gently closes the door on superficial connections, it's not rejection, it's self-defense. And when she embraces the stillness of her own company, it's not arrogance, it's lucidity. That lucidity is her revolution. By daring to turn her gaze inward, she awakened to her power. Jung taught that outward-looking dreamers can never match the awakenings of those who journey within, and she has tasted that awakening. Her path wasn't easy. She had to shed masks one by one, face the ghosts of dependency, and sift through the rubble of old beliefs. She stumbled, she wept, but she always rose again, each time a little more whole. Now, she no longer defines herself by others' opinions. She sees herself with her own clear eyes, and that clarity has rewritten everything. How many of us have anguished over the question, does being alone mean I've failed? She knows that struggle intimately because she lived it. She too felt the sting of judgment in a world that worships coupledom, even unhappy coupledom. But one dawn, she whispered to herself, "It's better to stand alone than to disappear inside a relationship." From that moment, she vowed never to accept less than she truly deserves. Her journey isn't a straight line. Some mornings, doubt still tugs at her, reminding her of past hurts. Other nights, she feels nostalgic for what once was and for fleeting seconds, wonders if she's chosen the harder road. But with every conscious choice, her resilience deepens. She's learned that real love doesn't bind, it liberates. It doesn't absorb, it uplifts. Until that kind of love walks into her life, she'll continue to nurture herself out of self-respect, not pride. This woman embodies Jung's process of individuation. She shattered, descended into her shadow, and emerged more whole than ever. She isn't half a person or half of anything. She doesn't want someone to complete her. She longs for a companion who walks at her level of consciousness. That demand for emotional responsibility, rare as it is precisely what makes her so profoundly powerful in a world that still fears authenticity. I'm grateful to witness her story because it reminds me, and perhaps reminds you, that the greatest love affair we will ever have is the one we cultivate with ourselves. And that, ultimately, is a love so fierce and so true, it transforms everything it touches. Every step she takes alone today isn't a stumble, it's an anthem of triumph. Each time she utters no, it echoes with the steady drumbeat of self-respect. Every deliberate absence she creates becomes a testament that love is never something to be begged for, but earned through mutual devotion. Watching her, I feel a swell of admiration. She no longer scrambles to prove her worth to anyone. That radiant certainty, born from the hidden chambers of her soul, transforms the air around her. A woman who rediscovers her power becomes dangerous, not because she wields weapons, but because her lucidity cuts through illusions like a blade. The woman living solo now isn't the same one who once knelt, pleading to be seen and loved. Something inside her shattered, and paradoxically, it was precisely that rupture that set her free. I've seen that moment of collapse, raw, terrifying, and yet bursting with possibility. It reminded me of Jung's words, "The tree that aspires to reach the heavens must send its roots into hell." And oh, how she descended into the hell of her history, facing down ancestral fears, inherited wounds, and generational traumas that bound not just her, but every woman who came before her. She shattered toxic cycles with fierce determination, refusing any script that demanded she heal others at the cost of her wholeness. When she stopped scavenging for crumbs of affection, The world gasped and tried to convince her she was mistaken. Yet she planted her feet firmly, first trembling with insecurity, then standing tall in awareness, and finally radiating in vulnerability. One who's inhabited her abyss no longer fears the silence of absence. Instead, she feasts on nourishing herself with stillness, warming her spirit with the glow of her presence. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. This woman is not unattainable, she is uncompromising. She knows the vast chasm between opening her heart and letting it be torn apart. So she opens it, but only to those bearing truth, not hollow words or rehearsed sound bites. She's witnessed too much to be fooled by performance, masquerading as presence. Her intuition is a sharpened blade, her energy an unbreakable filter. If a soul doesn't vibrate with depth, she senses it from across the room and strides away without a backward glance. Her evolution isn't merely personal, it's archetypal. It feels as if she has tapped into an ancient ancestral wellspring of wisdom, recalling a time when women were born not to serve or be shaped, but to overflow with their own unique light. Watching her, I'm moved not only by her solitude, but by the fierce, liberating power that comes when a woman truly stands in the fullness of herself. When she unlocked that buried memory, something fierce and untamed awakened within her, a woman who lives by intuition, who claims emotional sovereignty as her birthright. In solitude, she is not adrift but profoundly anchored to something vast and radiant, her destiny unfolding. And though the world may brand her cold, difficult, or insensitive, those words slide right off her armor of self-knowledge. She no longer contorts herself to blend in. She stretches her being outward, filling every space with the gravity of her presence. I find her courage electrifying. She does not clamor for attention, she simply radiates it from the depth of her authenticity. No longer waiting for a rescuer, a suitor, or a savior to choose her, she stands in her power and chooses herself first. That flip in logic confounds those who still seek to cage the feminine spirit in neat boxes, but she has already stepped through the threshold. On the far side, she discovered that the truest partnership is the one she cultivates with herself, one rooted not in need, but in reverence. There is something sacred about her stride through life. She walks as if each step is a prayer, a silent affirmation that she needs no ovation, no chorus of voices to validate her. In the hush of her confidence lies her greatest strength, unshakable, enigmatic, and quietly revolutionary. Carl Jung taught that what we conquer within shapes our fate. By choosing herself again and again, she has become the architect of a destiny that invites awe and, yes, sparks envy in those who glimpse its glow. She doesn't fill emptiness with empty promises. She knows that belonging is never begged for, but extended through truth. When someone's gesture rings hollow, when the invitation lacks sincerity, she doesn't react with anger or bitterness. She withdraws with the poised grace of someone who's lost herself too many times to risk that pain again. Yet please don't mistake her withdrawal for rejection of love. She longs to give and receive it, to be held, cherished, and truly seen. But she refuses to shrink her boundless spirit, to fit into molds that never accommodated her brilliance. Witnessing her journey, I feel both humbled and inspired. She reminds me that true freedom comes not from having someone by your side, but from loving yourself so fiercely that companionship becomes a celebration rather than a necessity. In every fierce beat of her heart, she declares, "I am whole, I am free." And this is the power of a woman who finally chooses herself. She now offers her heart only where it can spread its wings and breathe in freedom, where there's room for every facet of her being to glow. This isn't a petty requirement or a game of romantic idealism. It's a demand for true emotional maturity. She's learned that real love calls for someone who has already stared into their darkness, who knows their scars and still chooses to show up with an open hand. I find that incredibly powerful because it means she refuses to dilute herself for the comfort of another's insecurities. Gone are the days when she chased fairy tale endings or settled for grand gestures that meant nothing beneath the surface. Instead, she seeks a soul alliance, a partnership woven from mutual respect and fierce generosity, where neither partner dominates nor yields purely out of habit. In this sacred exchange, both spirits expand, painting their dreams in vibrant hues, sharing their deepest fears without judgment, and daring to heal side by side. To some, this lofty vision may seem unreachable, a fanciful castle in the sky. But she has grown to believe that anything less than wholehearted reciprocity is simply emotional leftovers, and she would rather wait at the empty table than eat crumbs of affection. It's tempting for onlookers to label this stance as arrogance or coldness. Yet, from where I stand, it reads as the purest form of self-love. She's not afraid of solitude. She's unafraid of her worth. When you witness her walk through a crowded room, you don't hear her voice first. You feel the hum of her presence. The air around her vibrates with a different frequency, one that carries the unspoken truth. She will not negotiate her essence for applause or approval. We are watching the birth of a new archetype, a woman who turned her back on superficial desires and chose soulful depth, who no longer yearns to be desired, but demands to be respected. She embraced loneliness not out of despair, but out of conviction, understanding that love that insists on self-denial is a love unworthy of her. And as she stands tall in that realization, her entire universe shifts. She moves through life with a quiet magnetism that draws in those brave enough to meet her gaze, to match her honesty with their own. In that space, real love takes root, and nothing less will ever satisfy her heart again. It's not mysticism, it's raw, vibrant energy pulsing through every fiber of her being. It's the invisible weight carried by someone who has weathered the cruelest internal wars and, despite the scars, chose to return home to herself in a state of fragile peace. Not because she'd vanquished every demon, but because she learned to coexist with her darkest fears without bowing to them. She stands as living proof that true strength isn't born of perfect victory, but of tender resilience. Carl Jung would remind us that wholeness isn't achieved by banishing our contradictions, but by weaving them together into a singular tapestry. And that is precisely what she has done, integrated her shadow and her light, her fierce storms and her soft sighs, until each facet of her soul resonates with the others in harmonious unity. She doesn't reject love, quite the opposite. She simply refuses to submit to lopsided relationships that demand she dim her radiance, so another might shine brighter. What she yearns for is love unedited and unfiltered, a bond where her laughter can ripple into tears without apology, where her silences can thunder with meaning, and where her storms can swirl freely without triggering blame. She knows now that those who cherish only the polished, pretty parts of her have yet to discover the sacred beauty found in her rough edges. And she's seen that people who insist on non-stop sweetness betray a fear of growth, the kind of growth that demands tasting life's necessary bitterness. She is too fully formed to accept anything less than total reciprocity, too whole to settle for halves, too free to be confined by prisons disguised as care, and too sensitive to endure mere surface-level bonds. Yet, paradoxically, she is also strong enough to walk this demanding path, even when it cuts deep, even when it leads her into solitude, even when it's misjudged by those who fear what they cannot contain. This is the journey of an awakened soul, one that willingly trades the deceptive comfort of instant validation for the richer, more perilous quest of inner truth. And in every measured step she takes, she embodies Jung's teaching that by embracing the totality of ourselves, we become the architects of our liberation. Deep down, the world trembles at the sight of women like her, women who don't plead, who refuse to bend, who cannot be shaped to fit anyone's preconceptions. In their silent rebellion, They rip apart the invisible architecture of outdated expectations. The idea that a woman's worth must be measured by the presence of another beside her. They question patterns passed down through generations, those unspoken emotional contracts that said, "You are only complete when you're coupled." And when she tears up those contracts and rewrites her narrative, she doesn't just free herself, she lights a torch for others to follow. To the rigid systems that profit from conformity, her very existence becomes a revolutionary act. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. I feel a surge of hope whenever I witness her journey. She moves forward sometimes with tears brimming in her eyes, tears that carry the weight of old grief and fierce determination in the same drop. Other times, she lifts her chin and walks tall, chest open to the sky, her shoulders squared against every whisper that tries to pull her down. Yet always, her feet are anchored firmly in the earth. She stands on the solid ground of self-knowledge, knowing that after all she's endured every betrayal, every moment of doubt, every lonely night she is finally, unequivocally, in communion with herself. And isn't that the most profound company imaginable? When love at last comes for her, it won't arrive as a savior to rescue or redeem her. It will show up as a jubilant celebration, a lover, honoring her fullness, rather than filling her void. It won't tiptoe in to plug holes. It will overflow like a spring breaking through stone, spontaneous and unstoppable. Because she has already learned that true love is expansive, not possessive, nourishing rather than consuming. Yet, the world won't let her march unchallenged. Every time she chooses her peace over someone's approval, the chorus of naysayers rises, urging her to reconsider. "You're making a mistake," they say. "You'll regret this." But inside her, something vital is stirring, a deep realignment that has nothing to do with pride or rebellion. It's a sacred knowing that only blooms in the quietest moments, when the world is hushed and all she hears is the gentle beating of her own heart. In that hushed space, she discovers a rare wisdom, one that only grows when you dare to walk alone, listen closely, and trust that your soul's compass always points home. That quiet revolution unfolding in her soul is precisely what Carl Jung named individuation, the courageous journey of becoming fully oneself, stripped of every mask and concession. In that process, she discovered that no external force can ever outshine the truth pulsing inside her chest. And that truth does not need fanfare. It reveals itself in the gentle click of a closing door, when she refuses to harbor resentment, in her graceful withdrawal from spaces that no longer nourish her spirit, in the serene smile she wears when she sits in silence, perfectly at peace without anyone else's company. She came to understand that solitude is not a sentence but a sacred vow of fidelity to her soul. An awakened soul does not submit, does not dim its light, does not plead to be seen, it simply is. And in that simple being, she found her power. Around her, the world will never stop whispering that she's missing something, that she needs distractions, a plastic prince, or a showy romance to feel complete. But she's already torn aside the veil. She knows true completion comes from within. When you live with that knowing, everything shifts. Desire blossoms into discernment. You no longer chase fleeting sparks, but seek depth that sustains. Lack transforms into choice. You choose presence over absence, authenticity over pretense. Waiting becomes a path, rather than a pause, a time for inner cultivation, rather than anxious longing. What once wounded her now teaches her. What once bound her now liberates her. You might feel that same restlessness stirring in your chest, a memory of heartbreak, an old wound that still aches, or perhaps a sense of nostalgia for a freedom you never fully tasted. Maybe you see a reflection of this woman in someone you've met, or perhaps in the woman you're becoming. Wherever you are on this journey, know that the courage to stand alone is the seed of your greatest transformation. In learning to walk her path, she discovered something miraculous. The universe conspires to meet us when we finally honor ourselves. Doors that once slammed in her face began to open. Invitations surfaced not from illusion, but from souls who recognized her lucidity and were ready to walk beside her, neither overshadowing nor overshadowed. And because she had already claimed herself, she could receive these gifts with open hands, without the lingering hunger of needing to belong. This is the new archetype of womanhood, not one who sacrifices herself at the altar of expectation, but one who worships at the altar of her essence. She invites you, too, to step into that altar, to face your shadows, to integrate your contradictions, and to emerge fiercely whole. For it is only when you stand in your light that you can truly illuminate the world around you. There's a quiet pulse beneath both stories, a sacred invitation to look beyond the familiar contours of expectation, to notice the parts of ourselves that spill over the edges of old molds. In one narrative, it may be the ache of childhood echoes that still tug at our heartstrings. In another, the fierce joy of choosing solitude over half measures of affection. Yet in both, something stirs that refuses to be neatly categorized, a tender, yet unapologetic spark that, if we dare to honor it, can transform the very way we relate to love, to others, and, most importantly, to ourselves. This woman who walks alone isn't simply an outlier on some societal graph. She embodies a living testament to emotional liberation. I find her journey profoundly moving, because she reminds us that self-reconstruction need not be rushed by timetables or shadowed by fear. She rebuilds brick by careful brick, guided not by others' timelines but by the rhythm of her heartbeat. There's no need for grand declarations, no burden of proof required, only the steady commitment to honor each new insight, each trembling discovery, each moment of fierce, tender growth. She is neither a leader nor a follower. She is the solitary traveler on a path that runs parallel to the well-trodden road. It is an inviolable trail marked by authenticity, by the courage to walk unaccompanied when necessary, and by the generosity of light she leaves behind. With every thoughtful step, she leaves small flames flickering in the darkness, tiny beacons for anyone else awakening to the truth that their worth isn't defined by companionship, but by the depth of their own self-knowing. And in those flickering lights, we find our hope. We see reflected in her eyes the possibility that real connection can grow from wholeness rather than from longing. We glimpse the beauty of a woman who chose her freedom and, in doing so, ignited the courage in countless others to do the same. Perhaps that is her greatest gift, not a lesson imposed, but an example lived, an open door showing us all that the most profound revolution begins when we simply decide to be ourselves, fully and without apology. And that's our journey together through the story of a woman who chose herself first, who found strength in solitude, and who reminds us all that true love begins with self-respect. Now it's your turn. What has resonated most with you so far? What insight from her voyage will you carry into your own life and put into practice starting today? Share one lesson you've learned in the comments below. I'm eager to read how this message speaks to your path. And if you found value in this video, please leave your comment below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.